of them are put in there because they're important to people's culture. Like, for example, all of these animals here, there's a turkey, there's a type of snake, I'm not sure what that snake is, but there's a muskrat, a bobcat, etc. These are all animals that represent different clans of Ojibwe people, some of the native people who were there before colonization. Here, there's a scene of a square dance, and all of the animals in it are animals that dance in nature, right? We also have other ecological metaphors. Like here this is a Cope's gray tree frog. All of these frogs are the same species, and that's an endangered species from that lives in Virginia in that area. And maybe some of you already know that frogs and all amphibians are what people call indicator species, as in they're the first ones to get sick when the environment gets polluted and stuff. So we have them representing the miners, because the miners in this region are doing very poorly. And we kind of wanted to say, like, if mining is bad for miners, maybe there's something wrong with the whole sort of system, right? Maybe they're an indicator species of what's going on here. But then we also have other ones that are less ecological metaphor. Like here's a doctor who's taking huge amounts of money for these highly addictive prescription painkillers that are really, not the right thing for this frog to be getting. And of course, all over the U.S., we have these doctors who are these sort of well-endorsed pharmaceutical jackasses. And we have other things like that, right? Like we draw our metaphors from all sorts of things, cultural, ecological, etc. A lot of times it's jokes, and then we spend a lot of time drawing out, sketching out different versions of how these metaphors could be represented. And actually, in the process of making the true cost of coal, we went through multiple different iterations of this. First, there was this sort of work in progress. That was just a lot of sketchy images that we compiled on Photoshop, printed out at the end like this, but a small one, and took it back to the communities where the stories came from. And we asked people, did we do a good job? Did we accurately represent what you were the story you were trying to tell? Did we really capture the essence of it? How do you feel being represented as a cockroach? Things of this nature. And people sometimes said, it's great, I really love it, and sometimes people said, no, you got it totally wrong. Let's try again. And so it was actually really good to have that multiple iterations and have that feedback. It really helped us to improve the graphic, and we actually went through multiple drafts. We also took the works in progress to communities where people have never even heard of mountaintop removal, all over the U.S., different cities and rural places, and we checked in with all these different audiences and asked them, does it make sense to you, what we're trying to describe? Is this, we wanted to communicate to folks in Appalachia, we also wanted to communicate to people outside. So it was a careful balancing act, and we got lots and lots of feedback. And so in that sense, 10 members of the Beehive Collective worked on this over the course of about 2.5 years. But actually, probably somewhere over 2,000 people had some kind of input into this graphic before it was finished. So that's how it got to be so elaborate, so comprehensive. Let me think, what else about the process? We do a lot of going back and forth between pictures and words. We collect all of these stories, we hear all of these words, we start drawing pictures from the beginning, but also we're talking about it, talking a lot about it, trying to create a picture that can really communicate 1,000 words or whatever. But then, when we're finished with the pictures, we take them on these big tours, right? Actually, I have a few other photos here. So we go to high schools, we go to public schools, and we go to universities. This is actually at Azim Premji. Just earlier, we go to big protests, we go to different community centers, we take the graphics back to the communities where their stories are from. This is a graphic that's about the drug war in Colombia, on tour around all these Afro-Colombian villages in the Andes Mountains where people are actually affected by these things. So it helps people to tell their own stories. And we do a variety of different workshops where it's interactive, right? People get to participate in in telling the stories. This is another school in Chicago. And so the pictures sort of evoke a lot of words, as we'll hide it. So we go from words to pictures, back to words again, and that becomes really interesting. It makes it very telling stories with pictures is very flexible, right? You can change it around, you can adapt it, you can add all these layers of complexity, but then cut them out if you like to later, and just sort of gloss over the surface. Does anyone have any questions about the process?
Yeah, so if you're 10 of you all working on one piece, there's two questions actually I have about that collaborative process. One is about style, and the other is about how stories get distilled. Like, do you choose what aspects you're going to work on, or you say that so that process. How do you what are the stories that you and Tyler worked on here, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first, because it's a little more complex, and it comes first in the order of things. I think that there was a 3-month research process, a 3-month story gathering process. Folks split into groups and traveled all around the Central Appalachian region. And then there was at least another 3 months of sitting around and talking about it afterwards. And so there was a lot of sort of this idea of patience and emergence, this idea that if we just keep talking about it, it will come to us. What is the right thing? What are the important things? What is the unnecessary details that can get cast aside or crammed in some tiny little itty-bitty thing? And also this idea of we're always striving to layer things on top of what's already existing, rather than saying like, I like this one better, so your idea has to go. Instead, we say, okay, I have this idea that I'm really attached to, so how can we combine it with your idea, which is very good, and let's put them together. And then when it comes down to actually drawing, I should have said this, I just slipped my mind. It's actually, of the 10 people who worked on this, only 4 ended up doing the illustration work. There was some folks who were primarily involved in research. Others, there was a team of 2 who designed the sort of storyboard and layout. And then from there, some of our other graphics had more illustrators on them. And so it becomes more complex, but even with the true cost of coal, basically what we did is we divided up the drawing by different types. So all of these plants, one person drew them. The machines, one person drew those. Other things happen, like in some of our other graphics, one person drew all of the insects, and another person did the furry animals, and another person did the feathery ones, right? Because they have different sort of textures, and so people can come at it with different styles, and if we just plan it carefully, it creates the illusion that it's all the same. And in many ways, it's similar to the way a comic book is made. It's like writer, pencilist, inker, colorist. For example, most of the work that I did was in what we call the concept drawings, bridging the gap between a long paragraph describing the idea to this very polished, finished drawing. I did the first initial sketches of trying to figure out how that concept would go. And then I like this very much because I like working in this sort of quick and gestural style, and I like the sort of problem solving of turning words into pictures, but I'm not actually very interested in the very detailed type of stuff that I know some other people in the group would always be like, that's nice, but you could do it better. Look at that hot spot in the frog's eye is not in exactly the right place to match with the light source of the entire other thing. There are a few people in our group who are very perfectionists like that, and I say, okay, you draw it. and they do, right? And so in that way, we're able to all sort of combine our different skills and make something that's much more elaborate and skillful than any one of us could ever do. And then the other thing that's very interesting, I think, about this type of this sort of art form is that the drawing is only the beginning of the art piece, and and in a way, it doesn't stand on its own. Oftentimes, people come up to this, and if there's not one of us to walk them through it, or there's not the little booklet or some other piece of text to help explain it, it's so complex that they don't even know where to start. But I actually think that there's something that's good about that in a way, even though at first you might think like that defeats the point of an educational art piece if people can't understand it. But what it does is that it compels people to have a conversation about it, and it requires a sort of human engagement, right? And that's one thing that I think is actually really cool about it, because it doesn't stand on its own. I think of it as a really unusual sort of attention-grabbing device, and it kind of sucks people in. Folks are curious, and then we get to talk about it, and then sort of proceed from there. So in a way, it's like operating on many different levels, right? And that means that many people can engage with it, and that's why I said of the 10 people who worked on this project, only 4 were actually doing illustration. Others were doing research. People were organizing a whole sort of national, I dare say international, I guess because I can count Canada as well as exactly part of the U.S. Working on this sort of campaign to build the anti-mining movement, and coordinating with all these different activists and different organizations all over the place. And it's a very interesting process. There's so many different ways that people can engage. And then I mostly have done, over the last 6 years that I've been in the group, I have mostly been traveling and telling the stories. So that's other stuff too, but that's mostly what I've been up to. Because I get to meet lots of people. Does anyone have any other questions?
Yes. Do you were saying, like, you organize the drawing which chapter? How do you say this? Chapter, right? Chapter.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Do you always do this, or sometimes do you
No.
use some other process? Yeah.
No. If you see that tall, skinny one, that's the one that's called Plan Colombia, about the drug war. And it goes from top to bottom in a series of chapters. There's one that's lying on the table that's sort of two-sided. It has a lot of stories in it, and it's relatively chaotic. It's in no particular order. That was an experiment that turned out to be very challenging. People kind of, without some sort of organization, it becomes really easy. Well, let me put it this way. One thing that I have learned in the Beehive Collective, and through my experience teaching, especially how to do collaborative artwork, is that it's very, very important to set limits and restrictions on your concept, and to order things to some degree so that you can work within a framework, but not